So with that, we will bid Will adieu. Thank you again for your time and for sharing with us this morning. And we're going to move ahead to our next session, which is with LawPRO. And LawPRO is here today, not just as a presenter, but as our title sponsor for this plenary. And we greatly appreciate that partnership with FOLA, and that they have been generous with their time this morning. I think Dan Pinnington is here somewhere. Do I have that right?
Yes, I am.
Hello, Dan.
Good morning or good afternoon.
Thank you. I'm going to turn the floor over to you. Dan, everyone, is the president and CEO of LawPRO. He's held that role since 2018. He's been with that organization since 2012. And before that, he practiced as a litigator in the Niagara area. We're pleased to have Dan here to speak for LawPRO, our title sponsor, and I will turn it over to him for a briefing.
Thank you, Doug. Let me just share my screen and hope the technology cooperates. Believe you're now seeing my PowerPoint. Okay. Good afternoon, FOLA friends. Good to see everyone virtually. Very pleased to have an opportunity to provide you with an update from LawPRO today. Still very much looking forward to an opportunity to see people in person again, and I know I said that last time, but emphasize looking forward to that again. I ask for your indulgence today. I, for the first time, went traveling anywhere, went to Banff and did a bit of skiing last week and managed to have COVID while I was away. So I'm experiencing a bit of COVID cough occasionally. So I will try not to let that interfere with my presentation. So covering kind of the usual things we cover at this time of year at this plenary, a review of kind of what's happening now, and more of a focus back on what happened in 2021 and the lessons that we can take away from that. Want to highlight some new resources and mention something we're all very proud of, the new Title Plus. So operations at LawPRO continued through the pandemic with little or no interruption to our insureds. I'm extremely proud how our LawPRO staff stepped up and adapted, got us through a major period of change and disruption. We are in the midst of a return to office transition. Needless to say, we've had a few false starts on that with the umpteen different waves that have come, but we're implementing a hybrid work environment. Arrangements are dependent on role, but this will allow employees the flexibility to work from home, but also recognize that the formal and informal interactions in the office are very much of our culture. It's part of how people learn and build their skills, and very much a part of how we work together as a team. So we're trying to find the magic spot of living in both worlds. We're also in the midst of replacing our legacy claims systems. This is a major, probably one of the biggest projects we've ever undertaken, and we're working through that. It's ongoing for a year plus now. We're hoping to launch at the end of the first quarter next year. Let's dive in now to some statistics. Our annual report went out to you in our annual year in review issue yesterday. We continue to focus on offering the best coverage we can at the lowest possible premium. We now insure almost 30,500 Ontario lawyers, full-time lawyers, part-time lawyers, and a handful of paralegals. I think it's about 56 that are currently in partnership with lawyer licensees. Our very successful excess program currently provides coverage to 1,625 law firms, and we sold 26,000 title insurance policies last year through Title Plus. I'll come back to mention more about Title Plus as we go on. One example that shows the benefit of having LawPRO as your E&O insurer is the ability to keep costs down. Over the last 10 years, our combined operating ratio has averaged 107%. That means on average, we lose 7 cents on every dollar of premium each year. We make up that difference with investment income. And this reflects our commitment to providing affordable insurance for members of the Ontario Bar. This is one of the big things we do to offer the lowest possible premium to Ontario lawyers. Essentially, we offer as a not-for-profit, and it's not a business model that any commercial insurance provider would operate under. Our year in review, as I mentioned, went out to you yesterday. That's kind of the glossy, easier to read details from our detailed financial statements. Encourage you to take a look at that. It's available at lawpro.ca/annual report. I will provide you with some highlights there. First of all, a claims update. I know lots of interest in what's happened and what has changed. While claims slowed down over the last few years, unfortunately, claims did not take a holiday during the pandemic, as I know some people seem to expect. As you all know, in 2021, we began a slow recovery that translated for more work for many lawyers, in particular in the commercial area. Real estate market slowed down, almost stopped initially during the pandemic, but has now taken off. Courts were largely shut down in 2020. They've started to open up and do some proceedings remotely. There's still court delays and uncertainty, in particular about administrative dismissals, which seem to have stopped occurring. So that's a bit of an area of worry for us that we're watching, and we're seeing more frauds, and I'll come back to that further on in the presentation. So you can see from the graph, both in terms of open files, claims, and claims reported to us, that there was a dip in 2020, back up on 2021, and fairly kind of consistent with the ongoing trend we've seen in the growth of both. And remember that more lawyers being called, and there's more and more lawyers being called every year. Historically, we've seen a growth in about 2.3, 2.4% insured count, and it's almost a straight line back for 20 years. There's more lawyers out there working, but we saw, back to the trend we've seen in the long run, roughly in round numbers, about just over 100 claims per 1,000 insured lawyers per year. So definitely a slowdown during the pandemic, but we're kind of back on track to where we were, what we would have expected to see after 2019 had there not been a pandemic. And remember, on average, claims are reported to us 2.5 to 3 years after the work related to that error occurred. So despite the significant slowdown in work that happened initially in 2020, there's still claims coming to us that are kind of matters that are already underway and moving ahead. Despite the restrictions imposed through much of the year by stay-at-home orders and health and safety requirements, we actually closed more claims in 2021 than in any of the past 10 years, and closed 5% more claims than we did in 2020. And I think that's partially a reflection of a little bit of quiet and an opportunity to look at some of the older files. I think it's also a reflection that some people moved ahead and settled their matters rather than waiting for them to be litigated. Consistent with the long-term trend, only about 13% of the claims we closed involved an indemnity payment, i.e. a finding that the lawyer was negligent in some way. 87% were closed without indemnity payments. 35% were resolved without any payment of any kind. The ones closed with defense cost only are ones where we would have engaged outside defense counsel for managing formal litigation, getting coverage opinions, and so on. So no big changes in the types of resolution that we're seeing as a result of the pandemic. Highest numbers of claims continue to be real estate and litigation, 54% of our claims overall, although as you can see and might expect, a huge drop in litigation claims, reflecting the shutdown, the slowdown in the courts. We're starting to see that trend back up. Family law matters also slowed down. Corporate matters also slowed down. We didn't see the usual increase in claims that we saw when we've seen a recession or an economic slowdown in the past. Typically that drives clients to seek recompense of their lawyers, but things seem to be continuing on, and the positive real estate market and business keeping up, that seemed to proceed. Again, we are still very closely watching the number of litigation claims, given what we're seeing in terms of administrative dismissals, not proceeding automatically on the 5 years if not set down for trial requirement under the rules, and that's something we're watching. Something else we're watching is wills and estates. It did not take a dip during the pandemic. We continue to see the long-term growth trend in the count and the cost of litigation or wills claims, kind of reflecting population demand, demographics, but also remember that increased real estate values means that the most valuable asset in many estates is the real estate asset, often a home. And if there's a bit of a prize there, people will look for ways that they might be able to pursue that prize. When we look at claims by cause of loss, some very interesting trends here. Communication tends to be the highest or amongst the highest cause of claim. It did drop off, I think, reflecting in part the reduction in the count we've seen. Time management way down, and of course that's a result of the reduced litigation work that was being done, and again watching that for the impact of administrative errors. Interesting, error of law was down. The one that's kind of a concern for us is inadequate investigation or discovery of fact, a long-term trend of that increasing, and we we've called that the BlackBerry error in the past. I think we need to call it the iPhone error now. That's kind of the quick question, the quick answer, not having the lawyer understand all of the client's circumstances in terms of giving appropriate advice addressed to those circumstances, not reading information, not getting information or documentation, not doing background research, not truly understanding the client's facts and circumstances and drivers to give proper advice on the legal issues that are there. And parallel to that, you'll notice the clerical errors have also trended up. And we think inadequate investigation is both a function of greater electronic, less in-person communications, but so is the clerical error. So there we're seeing symptoms of moving to a remote working environment where there's less in-person interaction and communication. So something that we're going to focus in on and make sure our Practice Pro program and otherwise delivers messaging on that. There's a long-term trend on the LawPRO Premium, and I think significantly lower, obviously, than it was in the past, in the days of the insurance crisis, and indeed more than 10% lower than it was in 2016. If the base premium of $5,600 charged when LawPRO was created were here to be adjusted for inflation today, the premium would be $9,105. In other words, today's premium of $3,000 adjusted for inflation is just 32% of what it was in 95. So that's good news there, but a hint of some bad news perhaps coming. We expect changes in our capital requirements due to new international accounting standards. The IFRS standards will drive potentially a claims increase for next year. And we are also seeing increasing claims costs, specifically defense costs. So expecting that we will see a premium increase of some sort. Yes, next year. It's too early for us to put a firm number on that right now. It may be well into 2023 that we know the full impact of the IFRS on us. We should brag more about this. Each year we survey our insureds and consistently receive extraordinarily positive feedback from the work of the LawPRO staff and from the work of our defense counsel. Incredibly high satisfaction rates across the board. Very proud of the work that the members of the LawPRO team and our defense counsel do for us. Stepping back a bit of a broader perspective, looking at LawPRO through a corporate social responsibility lens, needless to say, over the last few years of the pandemic, we've all come to see how important home and work and community and support is, and the many struggles and strains that the pandemic has visited upon many of us, and mental health challenges faced by insureds and family members. We provided some very popular free CBD programs on mental health and resilience, and continue our support, financial support of the Law Society's member assistance program. LawPRO contributes almost half the annual cost of running the MAP. We see that as a very important resource for helping struggling lawyers out before they end up in deeper trouble and perhaps experiencing more claims. We like to reach out and get the new lawyers very familiar with us, thanks to the efforts of Practice Pro and Judith Straczynski. We did presentations at 17 law schools through the course of the year. And over 90% of our LawPRO employees participated in our charitable giving program. We have an annual program where they vote for 5 charities each year, and we support those particular charities through activities through the year. And in 2021, we embarked on a journey towards reconciliation in several ways. We're looking to do small actions more than just words, and some examples of that include staff participating in a challenge on acts of intention to make donations or learn something more, contribute something to learning more about reconciliation and how things can go forward. There we also participated in the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. Wanted to highlight very quickly some new resources from LawPRO. In particular, we've seen over the years new lawyers struggling with launching a firm, and equally so, frankly, more senior lawyers when they decide to leave a firm and strike out on their own, and then have to start handling all those things that were handled by admin people in the back office. So under the hot topics drop down on the practicepro.ca website, there's now a new list of information and resources for lawyers going out on their own. So whether folks are starting a new one or opening their own practice from leaving a big firm, loads of great resources there. I commend that for anyone who is making that change. I wanted to mention I was going to come back to fraud challenges. Frankly, we did see frauds take a bit of a holiday through the pandemic, a bit to our surprise, but in particular over the last several months and even through the latter part of last year, we are starting to see increased fraud activity. Some of this is the traditional ID theft on real estate matters, but we're also seeing a significant increase in wire fraud redirections. And so what happens here, often in real estate deals, but it can be on any matter, litigation matter, commercial matter, where there's a transfer of funds, is the fraudsters hack into the email accounts of one of the people involved in the transaction. That can be our insured lawyer, it can be the client, It can be the real estate agent or the investment counselor or someone else involved on the matter. And they sit back and they watch the emails going back and forth. And on the closing day or day before the closing day, there's an email received by the law office, by the lawyer, by the support staff that says, please don't send the money wherever it was supposed to go intentionally. Please wire the money to blah, blah, blah. And that's usually an account that's somewhere out of the country. And, sometimes there's urgent circumstances presented about why that's the case. I think out of, good intentions and all, the lawyer or the staff person tries to help, and notwithstanding they may have known the client for 20 years, they send the money off to a new bank, and we have seen, sometimes high six-figure losses on these. The fraudsters are really good. They will cover their tracks by deleting emails that they're sending purportedly in the client's name, and they will sometimes take the conversation to a separate email channel by creating an email address that's almost identical to the firm's address. Again, people are rushed and try. So I encourage you, and we're willing to have a LawPRO person ready, willing, and available to have somebody do a virtual or even in-person presentation to your members on fraud and fraud prevention. Please contact myself or Ray or Judah if you're interested in having us out. Here are a number of red flags to spot, and I won't go through these in detail, but they are often the red flags, or typically the red flags of many different frauds that we see, and like the fraudsters are always upping the game. We've seen some recent examples where they will actually come in and have the lawyer work on a matter for them, that, a minor matter, an incorporation or something like that. They will then come back 6-8 months later, 12 months later, and the lawyer thinks, oh, here's my client I know coming back. And so really need to be careful on these things. Watch for those red flags. Bottom line on these wire frauds is just lawyers and staff really need to be highly suspicious if there's any request for any changes at the last minute. They are so preventable, which is frustrating to us. We say call before you click. If you get that instruction coming in via email, pick up the phone, contact the client at a number that you know is a good number, separately apart from email, because that may be a spoofed email. You don't know who's looking at your account or at the client's account or somebody else's account. Call and verify. Train staff to be on the lookout for these. They often see more on them, often see and know more about a file than the lawyer does. So they need to have their spidey sense cranked up, and even talk to clients about this happening. Please, as always, all sorts of great resources at practicepro.ca, and encourage people to visit and use all of our resources there. I want to close out now by mentioning another major project that we undertook in 2021, and very excited to launch a better, faster, and more lawyer-centric Title Plus experience. We have a long history of supporting real estate lawyers being part of a real estate transaction, and that's where Title Plus and why Title Plus was launched. As part of this project, we've got a new and intuitive application website. We have implemented Title Plus legal counsel fees, like all our competitors have, to recognize the work of lawyers on these transactions. We have separate owner and lender policies for more clarity. and we've improved our underwriting and issuance process so that those happen much more quickly than perhaps they sometimes did in the past when there were more careful manual reviews of some applications. Most importantly, on top of being accessible on our new, very friendly website, we continue to be available on Realty Web, and we are also now available on Unity, which is the platform of choice by numbers of a large proportion of real estate lawyers in Ontario. So very pleased to have our policies available there a few clicks away. As a bar-related title insurance company, keeping real estate lawyers involved in real estate transactions is a big part of our commitment, and we're very proud of that ongoing commitment for supporting and keeping lawyers participating in real estate deals. Thanks to all of those that have been loyal to Title Plus through the years, and encourage those that are using one of our competitors to take a look at Title Plus. That's the end of my formal comments. I would be pleased to answer any questions if there's a bit of time left. 4 minutes, I guess.
Thanks, Dan. Yeah, we do have a bit of time, so I'm wondering if there are questions, if folks want to use the raise hand function or indicate in the chat, and we can call on a couple folks.
I have a question, if I may. Dan, you've made reference to the access insurance to lawyers and paralegals. Could you just elaborate a little bit more on the paralegal aspect? Does this in any way affect our rates or our fees in the event there is a claim made?
Sure. To be clear, it's only on the primary program that we insure paralegals. It's only, I think, 56 paralegals that we insure under that program. They are important for us to avoid coverage questions and coverage disputes. It was important for us to have the partners at any law firm in Ontario on the same policy. So it is that very small number of paralegal licensees that are partners in some form or another with lawyer licensees that are on the essentially on the same LawPRO policy, and they pay premiums just as any other lawyer insureds on that policy. Other paralegals in Ontario, we do not insure. We're not licensed to insure them. And a decision was made back when they were first licensed that they would be required to get their insurance from the commercial market. We don't insure, well, okay, I guess I don't honestly know if there are any paralegals who are, let me back up one step. Excess insurance works in a different way than primary. Under primary program, the lawyer is the named insured under the policy. Under the excess program, we offer limits above the 1 million per claim, 2 million in aggregate personal coverage under the primary program, up to 9 million in excess of the 1 million under the primary. But the excess coverage is offered to firms. Firms pay a premium that is underwritten individually based on the firm risk. I can't honestly say to you, that's a good question, whether we have any firms insured under the excess program that have a paralegal licensee as a member of the firm, but in the course of underwriting and paying the premium there, that would happen. That would be considered, and the paralegals would pay, or their firm would pay a portion of the premium. Our excess program is there, and we're very pleased and proud of it. There's a long history. It makes excess insurance available to solos and smalls who otherwise would struggle to have excess coverage available to them. You know, they're not going to go off and visit Lloyd's in London to see or get excess insurance. So that's the nature and purpose of the excess program.
Thank you.
Thanks. We are pretty much at time, so perhaps if there are other questions, people can get in touch with Dan or LawPRO directly, and we'll deal with those that way. Dan, I want to thank you for your time sharing that information. The visuals are certainly helpful, and of course, we thank LawPRO for its title sponsorship of our plenary this spring.
Thanks, Doug. Again, great to see everyone and look forward to see you in person at some point, hopefully the fall plenary.
Hopefully in person, knock on wood. Hopefully we're not jinxing that, but hopefully we'll be together and not too long.